Hi, I'm Clarissa Dan, I'm the editor of TFR, and I'm very lucky that Dr. Rebecca Harding has just given the most amazing talk on global trade, and the Causes for Optimism at our cross-border trade forum has managed to steal away from the coffee break and have a few words with us. Dr. Harding, could you tell us a bit more about why you think commodity financiers should be encouraged by the macroeconomic developments recently? I mean, world trade's been a bit worryingly slow, on a par with GDP, and your figures were like 1.9%. So what's the good news?
So the good news is the size of the market in the first place.
Okay.
So what we're seeing in global trade is a modest growth this year. For the first time, we're seeing an upward trend rather than a downward trend in world trade. So for the last 5 years, Delta Economics has been standing up at events like this and going, oh, it's going to be horrible.
Yeah.
And please, don't worry, hold on there, it'll recover eventually, round about 2015. And that's what we're beginning to see now. So we're beginning to see a slight uptake in global trade, which is having a big effect, because once you start talking about, even if it's only 0.5 uptick, it's having a big effect in trillions on the global market. So we're seeing a slight uptick, we're seeing particular fast growth in Asia, but also in North America. A lot of that's commodities based at the moment, and we're also seeing South-South trade, which is very much commodity finance based, and supply chain finance as well, and infrastructure finance. There's some really big opportunities out there.
And one of the things you were saying in your talk was that some of the shifting of the manufacturing was moving away from the established providers like China, and they were getting some of their manufacturing done on the service side.
Yes.
Out in Myanmar and places like that. And that's creating knock-on opportunities for other forms of finance as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. So, I mean, I think if you look at the Asian market in particular, it's very interesting because the trade finance market is developed insofar as the immediate aftermath of the financial crisis was, let's move trade finance from the developed north, if you like, to the south, because that's where all the opportunities are. Risks are lower, they're not so integrated into the global finance system. Trade finance actually locked down in the north, but in the south you actually saw it increase. Now, there are a lot of medium-sized businesses, small medium-sized businesses in those Asian economies in particular, who don't necessarily understand that they need trade finance, but they're doing infrastructure deals or they're doing supply chain deals, and they're actually using working capital rather than using proper trade finance, which means that there's a huge opportunity there, not just around those sorts of things, but also around the legal services and the banking services that actually support those businesses in their activities. So there are some very big, if you like, educational challenges, but at the end of that, some very big opportunities, and we're seeing Indian and Chinese service sector trade growing exponentially at the moment.
In particular, we've just had the Indian budget, haven't we? And I've been pretty impressed at how these the measures to get India back on track, there are 8 of them, weren't there?
Yes.
And so what are your thoughts on the budget that's just been, and what Modi's up to?
So I think Modi has taken a very pragmatic approach to the Indian economy, without wanting to over-egg the pudding. India was doing incredibly well up to the financial crisis. So I mean, the issue with India was that it had a very big pharmaceutical sector that was doing incredibly well, a very big technology sector that was doing very well, and quite apart from everything that it was doing in commodities and in infrastructure. So those two sectors, infrastructure and commodities, remained strong, but the more sophisticated, developed, high-end production kind of lost its shine a little bit. Foreign direct investment fell back. So what Modi is trying to do is actually rekindle some of that spirit of 2005, and 10 years on, actually say, we are a highly sophisticated technology-based economy. We have some challenges, but we have a young population, so the education and skills things are all very welcome. Spreading out the wealth to rural communities, very welcome, because there is a huge energy within India to achieve, and that, I think, is what's going to... there's a belief at the moment in India, and Modi is capturing that zeitgeist, if you like, to move the country forward.
In your talk, you talked about the sort of competition between India and China, and in their own way, the Chinese are taking down some of the walls that got in the way of trade. And as we close this little chat now, perhaps we could finish on China and where you think that's going to be going.
So China's an interesting case because China has been very, very, very dependent actually on the mid-tier manufacturing commodities to some extent, although it's done an awful lot of stockpiling itself to fuel its intermediate manufacturing base. China is now in a situation where it wants to move from being that infrastructure, commodity export-led economy, intermediate manufacture-led economy, towards something that's actually mid-tier, middle-income economy, growing fast through sophisticated consumer demand. Now, you've seen quite a slowdown in sort of the luxury goods end of the market through 2012-13 and to the middle of 2014, but we're beginning to see that pick up now, so it's possible that some of those structural changes are actually beginning to work through. You're seeing lower stockpiling as well, and I think if you look at luxury goods, German exports of cars, 8% growth this year. But if you look at things like cigars, which I didn't include in my speech, you're looking at sort of 13-14%. Collectible items, 18% growth. So a lot of this is actually suggesting long term there's a new Chinese consumer.
Interesting. Thank you so much for talking to us, Dr. Harding, and it's been very interesting.